Not far from a willow tree-lined canal in the embassy area of Beijing is San-i Banquet, a new restaurant whose presence is announced only by a small Japanese-style sign in fine brushstrokes and a beautifully crafted bronze door. The establishment is around a corner from a gaudy neon sign for a bistro, presumably meant to attract foreigners from a neighborhood. Yet many of the Westerners who would ordinarily be clients seeking entrecote steaks and red wine have disappeared. Their scarcity is a physical sign of the consequences of a decoupling between China and some Western countries, notably the U.S. So now demand for upmarket dining must come largely from Chinese patrons rather than foreigners. Not long ago, San-i's owner was an entrepreneur who was attempting to kickstart a recycled battery business and leading a 996, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, life, try and survive in the country's unforgiving competitive environment. Having given up, the proprietor now leads a more balanced life. He is not an outlier. There are more and more people who are making similar choices in Beijing today. No people have worked harder over many decades in search of prosperity for their nation and for themselves than the Chinese. Today, they wish to experience the fruits of their labors. And, just like this new restaurateur, they aspire to live a more balanced life. That, however, is not the message from Beijing. The government should be encouraging people to spend their hard-earned savings to compensate for the lack of demand from overseas, to enjoy shark's fin or abalone, just as the party elites have always done. Instead, the residents of the Chinese capital are told that in these fraught times, in the face of geopolitical tensions and Trumpian efforts to isolate their nation, they must rather learn to eat bitterness, to endure hardship and make sacrifices, in part. The conclusion that life should consist of more than work reflects the emotional scars of COVID, especially in Shanghai, where the months-long lockdown was particularly harsh. Because the only approved vaccines were mediocre in a country where families are small as a result of the one-child policy, families losing relatives while hospital doors remain shuttered have lost much of their faith in their government to at least keep them safe. In any case, as clients are directed up a flight of stairs to the private rooms of San-i, with their views of canal and a light show among the willows as darkness falls, they pass through a room lined with floor-to-ceiling cupboards of temperature-controlled moutai, a fiery, distilled alcoholic drink. Until recently, moutai was a choice of everyone seeking government favors, whether allocation of land, preferential loans, export licenses, lucrative business orders, or permission to list or travel abroad. In other words, as a lubricant fueling business transactions, moutai became the symbol of unholy ties between government and business and shorthand for corruption. Recently, Beijing has required state-owned enterprises to maintain registries of their supplies of the liquor and lock them in storerooms. In prominent banquet rooms, such as the luxury hotels, where officials can be seen, endless toasts with the clinking of glasses are a thing of the past. Austerity is now one of the slogans for those who work for the party. That exhortation, however, no longer resonates with anybody else. The government wishes its people to be good communists, to work ever harder to produce ever more goods. Sometimes, it seems limitless supply has become an end in itself, rather than a mean for workers to enjoy their hard-earned prosperity, however they may choose to define it. On the mainland today, consumption continues to remain low, about 40% of gross domestic product. By contrast, rightly or wrongly, depending on one's beliefs, in the U.S., the figure is 70%. This should be the moment when Beijing rewards its people for their hard work, giving them what they seek, not just what it thinks they need. That should include more robust pensions and improved health care. To undertake such reforms would support economic resilience by reducing households' need to save at a time when deflation is a problem, aggravated by a shrinking population, rather than inflation. Yet Beijing cuts salaries, rather than raising them, and cuts the amount banks pay for deposits at a time when its people become especially risk-averse, having lost money in both the stock market and the property market. Still, the landscape remains complicated. As the geopolitical rift grows wider and pressure rashes up on both the leadership and individuals, on a different level, the Chinese people are rallying to their government. They are no longer a nation of peasants, as American Vice President J.D. Vance would have it and have not been for decades. In other words, now it is the turn of their own government to treat the Chinese people as treasured citizens rather than peasants.